Hey, hello, hope you're having a good day. We're in the second month of 2020. The past couple of months, there's been a lot of people on YouTube and on the internet counting down their favorite movies, favorite video games, favorite music albums of the past decade. I'm a big heavy metal music fan, so I thought that I would count down my top 10 heavy metal albums of the decade from 2010 to 2019. So let's just jump right into it. Coming in at number 10, got my notes right here, we got Cattle Decapitation with Monolith of Inhumanity. On this album, I feel like Cattle Decapitation found the perfect blend of death grind and gore grind, along with that more modern technical death metal style and production sound that they've been leaning into on their newer albums. They started off back in the day as a full-fledged, death grind, gore grind band, and over the years they've started dabbling more in just modern death metal stylings, and I think that on this album is where they found the perfect blend of the two styles. The production is clean, but it still has a lot of that grime and filth and power that you expect from death metal production. It's not too squeaky clean where the drums sound robotic and everything sounds way too polished. So I think that they did a good job there with balancing the production style, the production quality, and the style of the music. The lyrical content of Cattle Decapitation's music has always been one of my favorite aspects of the band, and on Monolith of Inhumanity, the lyrics are thought-provoking just as much as they are brutal or disgusting or dark. A song that always comes to mind whenever I think of this album is Forced Gender Reassignment. Cattle Decapitation making a statement about respecting trans people and trans issues with a song that is about forcing cisgendered people to undergo sexual reassignment surgery so that they can feel gender dysmorphia for themselves. It's a really extreme and over-the-top way of getting that point across, but I think that whenever death metal has a point to make on societal issues, that is the best way to get it across, is using the extreme and over-the-top characteristics of the genre, such as extreme brutality, to kind of illustrate your point. And I think that on several songs in this album, Cattle Decapitation do that. That being such a big part of what they are as a band, is they definitely have a message to get across about environmentalism and societal issues and all sorts of things of that nature. And using over-the-top lyrics is just one of the ways that Cattle Decapitation get their point across. This album also saw the introduction of Travis Ryan's more melodic, retched vocal style. It's not clean, but it's cleaner than his more traditional guttural death metal vocals. Some people have called it his goblin vocals. We first saw those start popping up on this album, and I think that they were used very well, tastefully, to kind of add some diversity to the vocal stylings on this album. I feel like they got a little overused on later albums like Anthropocene Extinction and Death Atlas this past year, but I think that they were used very tastefully here. I think that Cattle Decapitation's mission statement has never been stated better than it was here on Monolith of Inhumanity, and they found the perfect blend of the death grind and gore grind styles and the more technical modern death metal. So that is why it comes in here at number 10 on my list. Now, moving on to number 9, we've got Bell Witch with Mirror Reaper. This album is a monstrous Funeral Doom album. Over 80 plus minutes of music, but it's all one track, one song, 80 plus minutes long, and it is just, as I said, a monster of an album. Because it's Funeral Doom, you know it's going to be over the top, super heavy musically. Whenever it gets into those really doomy, super heavy parts, it's suffocating. It's like you're delving down deep into this like ocean or swamp, and the pressure is crushing you. But then there are also these strangely, hauntingly beautiful moments throughout the album as well. And surprisingly, this album is very emotionally effective through all of the super heavy parts and the crushing doom. There's also shreds of beauty and things that will pull emotions out of you. It's just a really beautiful piece of music. The twists and turns make it well worth the 80 plus minute runtime, and I think that this is the best Funeral Doom album of the decade, the best album that Bell Witch have come out with so far. That's Mirror Reaper. Now coming in at number 8, it's Iceland's Mr. with Songvar Elds og Oreðu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly because Icelandic is not a language that I speak, but I hope that I'm not butchering that too bad. And that album title actually translates into English as Songs of Fire and Chaos, and that is a very appropriate album title because this thing is just hellish in every sense of the word. I think that Mr. are the cream of the crop whenever it comes to that Icelandic black metal boom that happened in the 2010s. They had contemporaries such as Nadra, Svartidauði, Sinmara, Zrine, Wormlust, so many great bands and so many great releases out of Iceland in the 2010s, but I think that Mr. was the cream of the crop with their debut album, Songvar Elds og Oreðu. This album is evil, hateful, cavernous, and in one word, I would describe it as cacophonous. What struck me about this album was it was the first time that I heard a black metal album in a pretty long time that I actually thought sounded scary. This album is what I imagine hell to literally sound like. This album reminds me of that part in the Inferno when Dante and Virgil are entering hell and they hear this cacophonous music that sounds like a bunch of different noises and pained screams of anguish coming from inside of hell. That's what this album reminds me of. It's just cacophonous in every sense of the word. The vocals sound like pain screams, and the cover art is particularly awesome as well because it looks like you're looking at a landscape snapshot of hell just before diving into the bowels. The music is cavernous, the production is raw, it's harsh, noisy, hateful, evil black metal, and that's why it's my number 8 pick. Coming in at number 7 is Gatecreeper with Sonoran Deprivation. This album is just an amazing mix of American death metal, Swedish death metal, and hardcore, all coming together for just an insanely fun 33 minutes of death metal, gory, knuckle-dragging awesomeness. Every riff is catchy and heavy and makes you want to headbang. And they've got that Swedish death metal guitar tone, that buzzsaw guitar tone that you hear on early Entombed and Dismember and Grave and all those great bands from Sweden. I just love that guitar sound. They use it to create some amazing riffs on this album. The vocals are great and guttural and nasty. The drums are pounding. They've got fast moments. They've got more mid-paced and slow moments. And all throughout, the album is consistent, short and sweet at 33 minutes. And it's just a lot of fun. That's my number 7 pick, Gatecreeper, Sonoran Deprivation. Coming in at number 6, it's Vector with Terminal Redux. This is a space opera, sci-fi, progressive, thrash metal epic. This album has an awesome concept that is woven into the music and lyrics incredibly well. The lyrics tell the story of the rise and fall of a space empire, and the music sounds futuristic and space age through the dizzying speeds, the guitar acrobatics, and the progressive song structures throughout the album. The progressive stylings of this album also never become boring or sound like flandering or needless, showing off, being technical for the sake of being technical. I feel like at the moments where this album gets more intense and more progressive and more technical, it only gets more exciting and engaging, and it only makes me want to listen more. This album is also great at showing Vector's range because you've got the more straightforward thrashing songs like Panopticon and Psychotropia. You've also got a ballad coming right out of left field with the song Collapse. And then you've got songs like the epic closer to the album, Recharging the Void, which just runs the gamut and shows off all of Vector's chops on full display. One of the best thrash metal albums of the decade, one of the best concept albums of the decade, and my personal favorite Vector album, and that's why it comes in at number 6. Now at number 5, it's Blood Incantation with Hidden History of the Human Race. 2016's Starspawn was a tough album to follow. Blood Incantation really hit it out of the park with that, but then they did it again in even grander fashion, I think, on Hidden History of the Human Race. When it comes to death metal albums that scratch that esoteric mythology, sci-fi, horror itch. I almost put Sulphur Aeon's Gateway to the Antisphere in this spot, but I think that even though it was a very close race, I think the Blood Incantation just barely eked by just ahead of them to land at this spot on my list. Everything on this album is done really well, from the lyrical themes about the Anunnaki mythos and alien life forms and their impact on human beings and cosmic conspiracy theories, to the music itself, which reminds me of classic early American death metal bands like Death, Morbid Angel, and Deicide, but it never sounds old or dated because Blood Incantation keep things fresh with their inventive songwriting and their progressive tendencies. I think that this was the best death metal album of the 2010s, and that's why it's number 5 on my list. Up next at number 4, it's Kvelertak with their self-titled album from 2010. Hailing from Norway, Kvelertak plays good old-fashioned rock and roll with some elements from heavy metal, black metal, and hardcore punk thrown in there for good measure. Kvelertak's later albums Meir and Antisphere are both great as well, and their third album Split just came out, so I'm definitely going to be jamming to that album for a while. But I think on their self-titled debut is where Kvelertak found the most perfect mix from their eclectic source of influences and inspirations. While later albums focus more and lean more into a more straightforward heavy metal, hard rock style, on Kvelertak you've got plenty of blast beats and tremolo-picked riffs from the black metal elements. You've got the hardcore punk intensity, and you've got the heavy metal catchiness and killer riffs. It's just an amazing mix, and it reminds me of what made Kvelertak such an awesome breath of fresh air when they first hit the scene, because of this eclectic mix of influences that they were able to weave together so masterfully on this debut album. This album is heavy, pounding, and way catchier than it has any right to be, especially considering that all of the album's lyrics are in Norwegian, and I don't speak a lick of Norwegian, but I still find myself wanting to sing along with every song. Kvelertak's debut is still in my regular rotation to this day, and that's why it's at number 4 here on my list. Coming in at number 3, it's Power Trip with Nightmare Logic. Hardcore and thrash metal mixed to perfection. Power Trip sound like they would have been right at home touring alongside bands like Nuclear Assault and Violence back in the 80s, but the music on Nightmare Logic does not sound old or dated at all. Rather, it feels more like the kick in the ass that the world could really use right now, especially considering all of the societal, political, environmental, and economic issues that are plaguing our times. When I listen to this album, I think, man, if we could all just hop in the pit and mosh to some Power Trip, the world would be a better place. Every song on Nightmare Logic is a banger. It's 33 minutes, all killer, no filler. The guitar tone is razor sharp and cuts through Power Trip's reverb-drenched sound. The playing on this album is very primal. The vocals always sound like a call to action. They're urgent and full of passion. And at the end of the day, this album is just plain old fun thrash metal. Also, Power Trip are very active on social media. If you don't follow them on Twitter, I highly recommend doing so. And that brings us to my number 2 pick, which is Ghost with Meliora. I almost chose Opus Eponymous to go into this spot because I really am just a sucker for that stripped back Blue Oyster Cult meets King Diamond type of vibe that they had going on back then. But after another listen to Meliora, I had to concede that this is the superior Ghost album. Meliora is at times haunting, extravagant, heavy, and many times throughout the album, it's a combination of the three or all three at once. The band's Satan-worshipping cult shtick has never been realized more fully than on the song He Is, which is like a perversion of what could be like a Christian contemporary gospel rock song, but the lyrics are just in praise of Satan. From the Pinnacle to the Pit and Cerise both showcase Ghost's songwriting chops, as well as their ability to balance symphonic atmosphere with heavy metal riffing. Songs like Mummy Dust and Majesty display just how impressive the Nameless Ghouls are with their instruments, as there's some impressive guitar work on both songs and some interesting song structures as well. I think this album is Ghost's finest moment to date. It's like a sundae topped with Satan-worshipping, campy, hard-rocking fun. And now, my number one pick, Behemoth, the Satanist. I think that this is the most extravagant metal masterpiece that the 2010s has to offer. This album is dark, triumphant, and it's evil and proud to be evil. The lyrics read like blasphemous poetry, and they're delivered masterfully by Nurgle, who has developed one of the greatest black and death metal vocal deliveries that I've ever heard. Every syllable can be understood, and it's shoved right in your face, but none of the filth and grime that you expect from black and death metal vocals has been sacrificed for the sake of clarity. And the music sounds like this could be Satan's house band. There are horns and extra instrumentation that they bring in to kind of elevate the guitars, bass, and drums, but the album never feels like it's not metal or not heavy. The other instruments never get in the way or dominate the mix, they only elevate the atmosphere, while the guitars and drums are still tight and heavy, chugging away and ripping and roaring through guitar solos and epic riffs. And then the horns and extra instrumentation comes in, and it's like the band is announcing their arrival as they march off into war. Blow Your Trumpets, Gabriel is an awesome opener with great lyrics, and it kind of sets the tone for what's to come in the rest of the album. Ora Pro Nobis Lucifer is kind of more straightforward blackened death metal with awesome riffs, a ripping guitar solo, great lyrics, and it's surprisingly catchy. And O Father, O Satan, O Son is a big high point on the album. It's the closer, the longest song on the album at just over 7 minutes, and it brings the whole album to a satisfying climactic close. This album is incredibly cinematic. It's a modern metal masterpiece. I think that this will prove to be a historically significant album for metal, and I think that it will be remembered as a classic in the future, and that is why I have chosen it as my #1 album from 2010 to 2019 when it comes to metal. Thanks for watching. That's my top 10 metal albums of the decade. Make sure to drop a like, comment, and give me your top 10 metal albums of the decade as well if you'd like. Subscribe if you want to see more videos. I'm going to try to post every week talking about music, movies. I do some music of my own. I'm going to try to post some of that here. I'm also going to do some film projects and try to get them posted here as well. I'm an aspiring filmmaker and a musician. I'm also going to make videos just talking about music and movies. I think that the next video that I will make will be the top 10 horror movies of the decade. That'll probably come out next week, so stay tuned for that if you'd like. And thanks for watching.